Hey, this is Warren Redlick. I'm here with Randy Kirk. We are going to talk about Tesla Megapack. We might squeeze Tesla Semi in. We'll see how it goes. But before we get started, Randy, you have a book. You have a great background. Would you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and just briefly about your book?
I am a marketing guy. I also sell. I'm a salesman, but I've been a marketing guy my whole life. And for 29 years of my career, I was a bicycle plastic water bottle manufacturer. So I had about 100 employees selling on 4 continents, selling Target and Kmart and Toys R Us. So I have a broad background that includes manufacturing and marketing on a wide scale. And I a few years ago, I decided I've written a number of books on small business, how to run a small business. And 3 years ago, I decided to do something on Elon Musk, talking about how a small business owner could learn from Elon Musk using things like first principles and getting a great mission statement. Anyway, I wrote this book called The Elon Musk Method, and I thought I was done. But then a couple of years later, I turned around. I went, there needs to be a book about the companies. So we call this one the Elon Musk Mission. And it's basically going through all the companies and trying to get the facts right. So we had 50 people on our team who fact checked the book, so that there's one source now where people can go and be fairly confident that they get the facts on all of the companies and all of the divisions. And then we really went in, or I in particular went very much in depth on the moats and on the marketing levers that could be pulled. And so that's the book, the Elon Musk Mission. Yeah.
I've started potentially writing a book where I argue with ChatGPT over why Elon's going to save the world. That's my rough idea.
There you go.
I started, but we'll see. I start a lot of books and don't finish them. Start writing a lot of books and don't finish them. Apparently, it helps to finish the book.
It does. It does. Yeah.
If you don't finish the book, you haven't really accomplished very much.
Yeah, and then you have to publish it and market it, and that becomes the even harder part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. We were going to talk about Megapack.
Right.
So the issue with Megapack, there's actually been some conversation online lately. There's Twitter account Zero Sum Game. There's Matt Smith. There's James Stevenson's been criticizing Zero Sum Game. There's this account JP Sartre, and they're all talking about Megapack. And Matt is mostly not participating in the conversation, other than to say it's the dumb conversation. My general sense is that Tesla is going to massively increase Megapack production and Megapack sales, and that this is going to be a fairly high margin, fairly profitable product that will generate on the one hand, it'll generate a lot of profits for Tesla, but more importantly, from my view, it accelerates the mission to transition to sustainable energy. Could you just what are your thoughts on Megapack? Just sort of at a high level, what are you thinking about Megapack generally?
So when we were writing the book and I was doing my research, I tend to listen to Elon. It always makes sense to pay attention to his words and to carefully. I'm a graduate of law school. I thought I'd become a lawyer someday, and we were taught in law school words matter. Okay, and so you want to look at the words, and especially in Elon's case, you want to look at the words carefully. You want to you don't he speaks in such short sentences, and his tweets are sometimes 3 words or 5 words, so you don't have too many words to interpret, but the interpretation is everything. So the interpretation that I had with regard to Megapacks and with energy storage in general was energy storage will eventually be as large or larger than automotive. He said that years ago. This is not a new thing. He said that years ago. Then we take the 3 terawatts, he's claiming that he would like to hit 3 terawatts of energy by 2030. That's been out there for a very long time too. I want to say that's at least 18 months. Maybe it's only a year, but I would say
it was battery day. It was battery day.
Battery day. Okay. So that's 18 months, right? So that's been out there for a very long time. So now you've got those 2 things to start with. Now we take and we look at how many terawatts of energy do you need for cars? So if you got 20 million cars, and let's just use 50 because it's easy to divide. So now you've got 1 terawatt that you need for automotive. Okay. So now you've used up 1 of the 3. Well, you still got 2 left over. If we get to talk about semis for a minute, I'm going to make the claim that it's going to take almost another terawatt for semi trucks. Okay, half to full, because it's 1,000 per. And the claim I'll make is that he's going to build at least 1 million of those a year, starting not that long from now. So the 1 terawatt for energy, 1 terawatt for cars, and 1 terawatt for semis is how it would be, how it would come out in the end. It might be a little bit more for energy, might be closer to 1.5 for energy. In any case, if you want to get energy storage to 1.5 between now and 2030, you got to start building some storage facility, both Megapacks and also power walls. So those two, and then there's some in between. I forget what they call them, but there's a medium size energy storage pack.
No, I don't think they make power pack anymore.
I'm not sure, because that would be great for small manufacturers and such, but I'm not 100% sure. That's why I've kind of lost track of that for the moment, because the power wall and the Megapack are the biggies right now.
I just really quick, they used to sell something called Power Pack. I don't see it on Tesla's website anymore. I haven't seen any indication they're still selling Power Pack. Power Pack was midway between Powerwall and Megapack. I think the determination was that 10 Powerwalls is probably roughly comparable to a Megapack and doesn't cost that much more than a Megapack. If you look on a dollars per kilowatt hour basis, Megapack saves you something over a comparable number of Powerwalls, but it's not as dramatic as you'd think. Okay. So I just think that it ended up being that the market for Power Pack just wasn't big enough to justify doing them. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're going to come out with a new one, but I think that's what happened. Right.
So doing a little Warren Redlich napkin math, if we're going to have 1 terawatt of energy storage by 2030, multiply that times $500 a kilowatt hour, and you've got a $500 billion business, which makes it about the size of Walmart. And you have it at about 50% margins, assuming margins hold up. And we could argue for days whether the margins will hold up. But my estimation that is certainly by 2030, the margins will hold up. It might be that the cost per kilowatt hour comes down some, but I think the margins will hold. So that's the what you call the high level story, is that would be the expectation of growth between now and then the story that Zero Sum 30 has been talking about, and that I actually broke the news on it in the book, the Elon Musk mission. I was the first to talk about it. I broke the story then that they will need to ramp rapidly. It's not something you can wait until 2009 to start ramping this thing up to those numbers. You need to start building Lathrops very rapidly in order to get to the goals that he has set.
Yeah, just really quick. I was on this path where I thought it was going to be 1 gig. I think your numbers on semi are wrong. I think your numbers on semi don't add up to a terawatt hour. They add up to 100 gigawatt hours. I could be wrong about that, but when you talk about 1 million semis
times 1,000 per or 900 per.
I don't know. I might be wrong. I don't think that adds up right, but I could be wrong. But anyway, and I don't think it's going to be 1 million semis, so we disagree on that one. I do think that 20 million vehicles, the battery pack's probably going to average about 50 kilowatt hours. That's a terawatt hour. But I was looking at something that they had written that, maybe it was an investor call, or maybe it was some publication that Tesla had put out, some presentation. And I believe they're going for 1.5 terawatt hours for vehicles total and 1.5 terawatt hours for energy storage total. So I think it's 1.5 terawatt hours for battery storage, which is Megapack and Powerwall. And so that's a bigger number. That's a $750 billion number instead of a $500 billion. And it makes a difference. And then the margins is one of the tricky issues. So my initial take was that margins might be really, really substantial, because the cost of the battery cells is going down, and they're using lithium iron phosphate, which is less expensive than nickel-based cells. And the cost of lithium iron phosphate cells might trend down to $50 or $60 a kilowatt hour. I mean, there's even the theory it would go down to $40 a kilowatt hour. When you figure out the cost of 4 megawatt hours of cells in a $2 million Megapack, it's like, because that's the biggest cost component is the cells.
Sure, of course.
It's hard to get to less than 50% margins when you do that math.
Exactly.
If you have 4 megawatt hours at $50 a kilowatt hour, it ends up being something like $200,000, but you're selling the thing for $2 million. And that's the biggest cost component. So you're already at like 90% margin. Now you figure you got to spend another couple $100,000 on their stuff. You're still at an 80% margin. but other people think that the margins aren't that great. I think the margins get better when you get economies of scale. I think it's still expensive to deliver the Megapack to the location. I think that's a non-trivial expense.
But that's an addition. That's not, that's clearly stated, I think, on the website. I didn't go personally, but everything I've been reading says that there's an extra cost for the design of the project.
Yeah.
Then there's an additional cost for the construction, of course, obviously. And then there's an additional cost for the implementation, for the execution.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I think there's other costs we might not be, when we say the margins are, 80% or 70%, there might be things that we're not accounting for that we should be accounting for. I'm not sure what they are. I'm not sure I'm right or wrong. I'm just saying that's out there. But regarding the ramp, I think Zero Sum has gotten carried away. He seems to think they're already producing at a 40 gigawatt hour run rate, that they're already making 25 megapacks a day, and I think that's a misunderstanding. I think that their production capacity might be 25 megapacks a day, but that doesn't mean they're making 25 megapacks a day. The way they get to the high volume is they've said they're growing Tesla Energy at 150 to 200% a year. That's like a 3x every year. If it's 200% a year, that's 3x a year. Well, you don't have to have that many years of 3x to get really big numbers.
Right. Yes.
So my gut hunch is that you are correct, that they have to build more factories for Megapack, and I don't think they're going to build more at Lathrop. So I think the next factory is going to be bigger than Lathrop. I think that Lathrop is a generation 1 factory, or maybe it's a generation 2 factory, but I think their previous Megapack construction wasn't really mass production. So Lathrop is the first attempt at mass production of Megapack.
Right.
And the next factory for Megapack will be a next generation factory that will produce it in higher volume, just like they do with vehicles. We figure out how can we make this, for less money, how can we make this more efficiently, how can we make this in higher volume. They need to make them in much higher volumes.
Right.
So I think they need a next generation factory, and they need to build a bunch of them.
Yeah. As far as what they're making now, there has been some on the ground reporting. I mean, there have been drone flights. There have been people standing outside watching the trucks come and go. They've done the drones to show how many were sitting out in the yard one day, and then how many were sitting in the yard the next day. And there's been additional reporting in terms of some of the projects that they've been going to. So there's been a considerable amount of reporting. I've been super impressed with Zero Sum 33s.
Well, let me just say it this way. Yeah. I did my own napkin math in a video recently.
Sure.
And Tesla's going to do for 2022, they're going to have done about 8 or 9 gigawatt hours of energy storage deployed. 200% growth would be 24 gigawatt hours for 2023. That's triple, right? It still doesn't add up to anywhere close to 10% of Tesla's revenue for the year. It's you need to it's gonna happen. When you get to 2030, if you keep tripling and vehicles are growing by 50% and you're growing by 200%, you're going to catch them. Now that's the battery usage. I think when they said it's going to be as big as auto, I think what they meant was that the scale of the business in terms of batteries used is going to scale to the same. Because right now it's like it's over 90% vehicle and less than 10% energy storage. Right. And that will soar to 50-50 or so. But the other side of that is, assuming that Tesla is able to deliver FSD, robotaxi, the revenue and profits from vehicles will be much higher than the revenues and profits from Megapack. I mean, even if Megapack's 50% margin, the margin on FSD is basically 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not pure 100% from an accounting perspective. I'm sure there's some costs, but it's pretty close to 100%.
Right.
And that's going to dramatically increase the dollars per kilowatt hour, right? If you're thinking about in terms of you're going to produce this many terawatt hours here and this many terawatt hours there. If your dollars per kilowatt hour are higher with vehicles because robotaxi makes them higher, I don't think there's a counterpart for energy that's comparable to robotaxi that really juices the returns.
Not at that level, but there is continuing maintenance. And I think Zero Sum Game 33, even today, was giving some examples of competitors and what they're charging for maintenance. And it could be on the order of, I think it was $60,000 per year per unit.
Yeah, but that's chump change.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying,
The unit is worth, you know, $2 million, $60,000 a year is chump change for that.
yeah, but it would still be, if it was a separate company, if we were looking at this outside of the Tesla world, it would be a significant company. It would be the largest, potentially the largest company in the world at this point. If it was,
I don't know if it'd be the largest company in the world, but it would be a big and powerful company that would be doing a lot of good.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So
but there's other evidence or other things to bring into the conversation in terms of where they might be right now. One is there's also evidence that they are already at least 3 shifts. So they've also seen that there's people there, 24 hours a day. They're not 100% sure. Nobody's been able to tell me, at least, whether they're working weekends. But if they're working 3 shifts, then that would give them at least 75% of max capacity out of that building. The other thing is,
no, it doesn't work like that. No, they're working on they're working on their manufacturing methods, and the manufacturing methods improve. And some of the increase in production is you added another shift, but some of the increase in production is we figured out how to do this more efficiently and more effectively. A big chunk of the ramp is the figuring out how to do things better.
So as a manufacturer, I can tell you that the products that I made had almost no ramp. Okay.
Yes, but Tesla products do.
No, I'm just saying. So you have a range. You have some products. Making a plastic water bottle, if the mold works, you're ramped to 100% the first day. Okay, so you're not ramping up. Making a car is an extremely complex product, so you have a massive ramp. As I look, and I'm not an expert by any means at putting batteries into containers and shipping them off, but if you look at the overall complexity of what they're doing, it seems to me the complexity is way less than an automobile.
It doesn't have the moving parts.
It doesn't have the moving parts. It doesn't have to be something that operates at 70 miles an hour. It doesn't have to pass all these regulations that cars have to pass.
It's regulated. No. It's very heavily regulated.
Not like a car. But
no. The utility industry is very, very heavily regulated. Come on.
But not like a car. That's all I'm saying. So I just think that the ramp is going to be so much faster. And so to me, it does make sense. They are also have noted that there's these, I'm forgetting the names of them, lifts that are lifting the containers from the finished, the end of the line and putting them onto the trailers for shipping. And that there's 2 of those, and that the capacity for those is already at the 25 per day, 10 or 12 each, and that they've now ordered additional of these, which would suggest that they're maxed out. And sometime around August, they're supposed to receive these additional 6. So this would suggest that they're even thinking in terms of something substantial in a fairly short period of time. And they have been working on this, by the way. Their first out from Lathrop was way back in April.
Yeah, I just want to give some context to something we were talking about earlier.
Right.
If they do 1 terawatt hours of batteries and it works out to $500 billion a year in revenue, or if they do 1.5 terawatt hours of battery storage and it works out to $750 billion in revenue, just for context, Tesla's total revenue in 2022 will be about 80 billion.
Right.
So the batteries, the energy storage alone, we're looking at a 6 to 9x.
Yeah.
Of all of Tesla, and that doesn't count the cars.
Yes, and I think Walmart is now at 600 billion, something on that order, in that ballpark.
I haven't looked. I don't even know.
They're the largest. They're the largest in revenue.
Yeah,
much larger than Apple in revenue, and then in profits. I think both you and I have talked, maybe even talked about this before, that Tesla could pass Apple in profits maybe by 26.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know whether Apple's going to grow, but it seems to me that Apple's growth is slowed quite a bit, and I think Tesla's going to grow faster. And there's, Tesla's revenue is really, I think that Tesla's ultimate story, if they're going to deliver robotaxi, which I think they will, until bought, robotaxi dwarfs everything. It just becomes so big that it just gets silly. I mean, the numbers can get ridiculously silly with robotaxi. And I think I'm more interested in the mission side of things. Now let me ask you about the mission.
Uh-huh.
How does Megapack fit into the Tesla's mission?
So obviously, of course, you reduce the amount of energy that is required from natural gas or other kinds of methods of producing electricity. You take out all the peaker plants. There's 1,000 peaker plants in the United States. As of this moment, according to my best research, you can literally tear down a peaker plant that you built last week and replace it with solar or wind plus battery, and it will make you money within a couple, 3 years. I don't
Sorry,
know.
I just want the audience to understand. A peaker plant, the demand for power fluctuates over the course of a day, over the course of a week, whatever, and particularly during the day.
And a season.
But particularly summer days in warm places, air conditioning use spikes in the afternoon, and the demand for electricity gets really high. And the main producers of electricity on the grid can't produce enough electricity to meet that demand. So there are these so-called peaker plants that only produce electricity when the demand is really high, and they charge a lot of money for that electricity. And Megapacks can replace peaker plants without solar by charging up in the middle of the night when the demand on the grid is low, and then discharging, sending power into the grid when the demand is high. And they're better than peaker plants. They're less expensive than peaker plants when they do that, and they are also more responsive. They respond quicker to demand.
Exactly.
They respond in milliseconds, where peaker plants take seconds or tens of seconds to respond. Right. So that's why Megapack is so important. There's another angle. So there's one theory which I think JP Sartre was an account on Twitter. I'm not talking about the French philosopher. It's somebody who uses the French philosopher's name for their account. JP is saying he's trying to compare Megapack and power and solar as if one is better than the other, as Megapack is somehow better than solar. And to me, that's nonsensical. It's like saying peanut butter is better than jelly.
Yeah,
they go together really well, but they're just different.
Right.
And I was trying to pin him down to say, well, what's the ROI on solar versus the return on investment on solar versus the return on investment on Megapack? And he didn't give me a straight answer, and I don't think he had an answer. So I think there's some extent people, including myself, sometimes we go off half-cocked and we start saying things that don't make a lot of sense. And I think JP might have, I don't know if jumped the shark is the right term, but
well, solar can be used without battery. No question about it.
And batteries can be used without solar.
Without solar, but it's the combination that makes it crazy efficient. And right now, we're talking about efficiencies that are, in some cases, half of what it would be for any other kind of energy storage, energy production.
Well, just to be clear for people, I was just talking a minute ago about peaker plants, and so the Megapacks can add value to accelerating the transition to sustainable energy or better energy anyway, by doing this, charging up at night when the grid has low demand and discharging during the day. And that can get rid of the peaker plants, tend to be the most polluting as well as the most expensive. Right. But what we really need is new energy generation that is not using fossil fuels. So nuclear, hydro, solar, wind are four of the big ones, maybe geothermal, but I haven't seen a lot of geothermal happening. No. So and because solar and wind don't work well at certain times, they're intermittent. Right. Like the sun isn't shining sometimes, the wind isn't blowing sometimes. You need batteries to back up when they're producing power and then discharge when they're not producing power, and that can make the solar and wind without batteries works, but it's not as good.
Right.
And
not as efficient, not as cost, doesn't save as much money.
Yeah, and it feeds energy into the grid that makes the rest of the grid awkward, because sometimes there's a lot of solar coming in and it's hard for the rest of the grid to adjust. But if they're producing their electricity and feeding that into batteries, and the batteries are feeding electricity in the grid as needed, that's probably a much better solution.
Right.
And that's almost like an argument we don't need to have. Like, we need both. And if we in society are going to start all owning electric cars and charging our electric cars a lot, we are at some level going to need new energy generation. Just solving the peaks isn't enough. And as far as I can tell, solar and wind are already cost competitive with gas and other power sources. So we're going to be seeing a lot of solar and wind, and we want to make that better. So we want Megapacks to support them.
Yeah. So a few months ago, because I'm working on the next book, the Elon Musk Magic, in order to write that book, I was trying to do some research into solar and wind and why it isn't happening faster, since we know that the cost has come down. And my initial research, and I don't want to claim that I've gone into the total deep dive yet, but most of my research seemed to be coming back that the reason solar and wind has not expanded faster is because there isn't enough batteries to go with them. And they're kind of waiting for the batteries at this point. And so that's another reason to look at this Megapack thing as the curve is huge, is because if you look out there, there are a lot of solar and wind installations going in right now, massive amounts. I think it was double this year over last year or something like that. I mean, it's a very high. The ramp is getting to look more like the S curve, but they do need the batteries in order to be as effective as they want them to be. Even offshore wind needs some kind of storage, and so everything needs the storage to go with it.
I got to ask you about something because I see solar farms popping up. I see this one particular solar farm when I drive up I-95 in Florida. I think I see more than one of them, but I'm just going to go off on a tangent here for a second and annoy the audience with one of my business ideas that I'm probably pursuing. I don't know if I've told you about solar farm apartments, but
solar farm apartments. Yeah,
we take all these big pieces of land and we stick a bunch of solar panels on them, and I think, well, that's an inefficient use of land. Let's take a bunch of solar panels, put them on there, and put housing under them.
Under them.
Well, really, what you do is you build housing that's optimized for solar.
Sure.
And I mean, really optimized for solar. And then you put solar panels on top of them, and it basically looks like a solar farm. It just happens to have housing under it. And you can provide the housing at low cost if you do it right. And then now you can make less expensive housing for people who are struggling financially. You know, the guy who's making $20 an hour, it's hard for him to pay $1,500 a month in rent. Maybe we can get him down to $1,000 a month in rent. And at the same time, we're taking the same land and we're getting dual use out of it.
Sure.
So I think that's a really valuable idea. But what do you think about that prospect? Does it sound crazy?
No, I think it's great. I think any kind of dual use works really well. I'm about 5-6 miles here from the University of California at Riverside, and it's a big ag school. And so every day I'm passing fields that are being dual used already. So they have the solar, but they also are planting under the solar.
Right. So that's agriculture and solar. I think housing is a much higher value use. Agriculture is good.
I'm just saying I'm agreeing with your idea only from the standpoint of if you can dual use, that's always going to be a huge benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm looking at all the potential. The reason I started digging in the way I did was I'm looking at the tops of all the malls and the tops of all the manufacturing plants and the distribution centers that could be covered with solar. And why weren't they being covered with solar? 35 years ago, when I had my factory, I looked into putting solar on the roof, and it wasn't quite there yet. But that was a long time ago. Today, you should be able to make money handwork fist putting solar on the roof of a factory.
I was watching Drew Baglino speaking. I think this was at Stanford, and he was like saying how he's driving with his, like, I'm just picturing his wife when this is happening, but because I know what my now ex-wife would have been like, but they're driving down the road. And he's like, that roof should be solar. That roof should be solar. That roof should be solar. And I walk around. I live in Cape Canaveral. You know, I watched a rocket launch this morning, and I live in Cape Canaveral, and I walk around and I'm like, oh, that roof should be like, there's a house right here. There's a house right here. Like, oh, that house should have a solar roof. It's got like a perfect southern exposure. It's this nice big roof that it's at like a good angle for the sun.
Yes.
You know, for the Florida sun. Like, come on, that roof should be solar. Like, I was thinking about talking to a friend about maybe I can become a solar salesperson, because there's people who make money selling solar systems to people. Like, I'll just go door to door and say, hey, have you considered solar for your roof? Here's what I can do for you.
Yeah, I actually suggested on somebody else's channel a few weeks ago that I think I'd like to put my application in to be a semi-truck salesman for Tesla, because it would be like selling ice cream to 4-year-olds. I mean, it's just like such a good deal.
That's a potentially good segue. But before we go there, is there anything else you wanted to add about Megapack?
Yeah, so I mean, we were talking about use cases. We were talking about the opportunity. Elon said the other day it's limitless. There is no limit to the potential, because
the demand is essentially unlimited right now, because they just can't produce enough Megapacks. Like, the demand will be unlimited the demand will so outstrip supply
for a very long time,
for 5+ years, if not longer.
So then you can start talking about who's the competition, but in an unlimited demand situation, you really don't care that much about the competition. What you want to do is make a compelling product for a compelling price, quoting Elon, and that should be enough to give you as much as you can possibly produce in a limitless environment.
Let me just, because I feel the same way about electric vehicles, actually. People are always talking about the competition is coming for Tesla. Like, no, Tesla and other EV makers are competing against internal combustion engines. And until electric vehicles are 75% of the market, maybe 90% of the market, if you make an EV that isn't better than a Tesla, but it is better than a gas car, you're still going to sell it.
Yeah.
Right. That's what people 100%. Miss. You can, like, I don't think anybody makes EVs better than Teslas, period. No. Full stop. I don't think anyone makes an EV that's better than anything. I mean, look, the Porsche Taycan might be better than a standard range Model 3, but it costs, 4 times as much money.
Right.
3 or 4 times as much money.
Compelling price is part of the line.
But I'm just saying, at the price point, nobody makes anything close to the comparable Tesla as an electric vehicle. So, but but there's still other gas cars selling out there. So if you make a decent EV that's better, that's if Tesla's making the Model 3 and they're displacing some Honda Accords and Toyota Camrys, and you make an EV that's not better than the Model 3, but it's still better than a Accord or a Camry, then there's still a lot of Accords and Camrys out there. You can take their sales. So
yeah, I think there is a problem. What I think a lot of the makers are not really looking at is the niche benefits. So Rivian, for instance, said, no, we're not going to go right straight up in Tesla's face, even though there's this huge demand. It's way better to go into a niche that Tesla is not currently addressing. And I think that's what the other manufacturers should be doing, is trying to niche themselves, because even in a unlimited supply situation for the next, 3 or 4 or 5 years, you still don't want. We've seen a few cars come out that were better than gas cars, and they still didn't sell.
So I would say the Lucid is they're better than gas cars, but not at their price point.
But even some of the BMWs and Volkswagens haven't sold. So
but they're not good EVs.
No, they're EVs. They're EVs.
No, I mean the BMW electric vehicles aren't good.
That's my point. Yeah,
they're not better than gas cars.
Okay, I get you. Okay,
that you have to be better than gas cars, and if you're not better than gas cars, you don't sell.
Right.
And so Lucid Air is a reasonably nice luxury sedan, but it's too expensive. And if you can buy a decent gasoline sedan or whatever, then you're not going to spend the extra money on a Lucid. There's reasons why people aren't buying them.
Right.
So there's a challenge. But let's turn this back to Megapack. The same context. If LG Chem or Siemens makes a battery storage device at utility scale, it doesn't take sales away from Megapack because the demand is so high, it doesn't matter.
Right.
If the demand is for 10 million Megapacks, I'm making up the number, 10 million is probably too much. But if the demand is for 10 million Megapacks and Tesla makes 100,000 and Siemens makes 10,000, well, they're not even close to the demand. So you just, it may be sort of like, well, Siemens will get the German customers and, Panasonic will get the Japanese customers and, CATL will get the Chinese customers, whatever, but still they can't make enough to meet all the demand in their countries. So if Tesla can ramp up production of Megapack, at great scale, then they fill the gap where others can't even provide what they need.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that I don't think Tesla should and probably will make the best product out there. Some other reporting has suggested that right now, not only do they make the best product, but they have the only end-to-end opportunity, the only end-to-end product, where they do everything from the consultation on the design all the way through the maintenance and software afterwards. Nobody else is giving them the ecosystem. So I think they will always be ahead as nobody's always 100% ahead, but I think they'll be ahead for years and years to come. And so I'm not worried about the competition at all. And yes, I think they'll sell all they can make for years into the future.
All right. So anything else you wanted to say about Megapack before we turn to Semi?
I could probably go on for hours, but that's probably enough.
So what's your take on Tesla Semi?
So Tesla Semi actually isn't an unlimited market like the Megapack. but it might as well be.
Yeah.
Because there's so few players. You have so few people making the semi trucks and large trucks, so you don't have very many competitors. You have almost nobody that has jumped into the marketplace that is making anything remotely close to a compelling product, because they're just like the automakers that don't want to. They want to keep selling the diesels because they're set up for that. That's what they know how to do. That's where they're making the money. They don't want to switch. So as a result, you basically have no compelling products out there other than this product. And the product was so compelling. So the information that we finally received, even short of some of the information we'd like to know, like the cost, the sell price, it's so compelling that anybody that has a brain, that has a fleet of semi trucks, should be lined up to buy them as quickly as they can possibly get them.
Yeah. I think that I saw some image of Nikola, whatever. They had like 100 semis on a parking lot sitting there unsold, undelivered. It has to be better than the alternative. It has to be better than the diesel trucks. And, what Tesla's doing is they're engineering the heck out of it to make it more reliable, better, more efficient, and so on and so forth. And they appear to have gotten there. And I do think the demand for semi is essentially unlimited. I say that the demand is unlimited until you're able to make enough to start getting close to the demand.
Right.
So in North America, we buy about 250,000 semis a year. I've heard different numbers, but I think it's about 250,000 a year. And what's Tesla going to make? 1,000 in 2023, maybe 5,000 in 2023.
I'm hoping for more than that, but we don't really know whether they've got a line yet or not.
But it's not going to be anywhere close to 250,000 this year.
No, and not next year either, because they said 50,000 next year.
Yeah. So how long does it take them to scale up to where they're meeting all that demand? It's a while.
So yes, I would agree. But once again, we're talking about cookie cutter. So when does Elon decide that the factory in Austin, I'm assuming they're going to build them in Austin. We don't know that for a fact, but once they set up a line in Austin and it has the run rate capability of 50,000 a year, and they get to a certain point in that run rate, when does he start building the second line? When does he start opening a facility in China or in Europe or in Japan or someplace else? When do they make the jump to where, because there's an argument that can be made that the semi is by far the number one thing that could be done to advance sustainable energy.
Well, I don't completely agree with that, but I've seen the argument before. But I wanted to ask you this: why is everyone obsessed with making semi in Austin when they built a factory for it in Nevada? And I don't think there's any reason to make it in Texas. Why does everybody think that semi needs to be made in Texas?
I don't.
Is it just because the cells are going to be produced there? What's the theory?
I don't know what kind of space they have in Reno. I know they said they had real problems with getting employees to Reno.
No, I know that's true. I'm just saying they already built the factory for semi. It's built.
But we don't know if it's a line or if it's a pilot line. So if it's a pilot line, then you got to have the room to actually.
It's a pretty big building.
Well, I know, but I don't know we don't know what it's being used for at this point, and whether they really, because it was supposed to be 4 times the size it is now, and they've stopped building there because they can't get people to move there.
Yeah, I don't know if people understand that. Sparks, I think it's in Sparks, Nevada, which is outside of Reno, Nevada. It's just the population isn't that big, and they're not necessarily that the people that are there aren't necessarily that well qualified. And so one of the challenges of locating your factory is you want to locate in a place where it's not hard to get people to do work.
Exactly.
And it's actually been a problem for Tesla, well, Panasonic and Tesla in Nevada, getting people to do the work there.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so that could be the reason. I don't know where it's going to be. The question is, he says it'll be 50,000. Again, I'm just taking Elon's words. He's shooting for 50,000 in 2024. And so if he's shooting for 50,000 in 2024, you can't be making 1,000. You can't be making 1,000 a month in January of next year. You've got to be making more than that. So I think there'll be more made this year. I think there will, if the line is not already up and running, the actual line is not up and running yet, it will be shortly, because you have to start ramping now if you have any shot at doing 50,000 next year. And I don't think he just pulled that 50,000 out of the air. There's been meetings and discussions, and that is a real number that he thinks they can make.
I'm going to go with you on that. So why is semi more important for the mission?
Okay, so semi does so many things well. It a diesel truck gets about 7 miles to the gallon of diesel fuel. 8 miles, 7.5. Who knows what
Is it that much? I thought it was worse than that.
I think that's the number that I've seen over and over again: 7 miles to the gallon. And they become more efficient in terms of the CO2 emissions and whatnot, but they're still bad. But the reality is that when you're talking about the number of miles that diesel trucks drive and the use of 7 miles to the gallon, they suck up, I think it's 20 times as much fuel as a 30 mile per gallon car.
But why? Oh, because they drive so many more miles.
So many more miles and 7 miles to the gallon. So I think it's on the order of 20 times what a 30 mile per hour standard kind of sedan today, or hatchback.
Well,
today.
that's missing that robo-taxi cars end up driving 16 hours a day.
Yes,
and replace 5 to 8 cars.
Exactly.
So when you get robo-taxi, then the robo-taxi cars end up being a bigger impact on the environment than semi.
Right. In this particular case, my one of my co-authors, Brian Wang, he's done the math, and he says for China, it was because they're a net importer of oil by a lot, that they would be able to save massive amounts, maybe even become energy sufficient if they were able to get out of the business of doing diesel trucks.
Yeah, self-sufficient or energy independent.
That's what I meant.
Right. So I had a conversation. I have a video on my channel maybe a week ago with a former Tesla China employee, and he felt that it's going to be harder for semi to break into China because of the nature of how semis are hired, that they're built in joint ventures with local governments, and the local governments don't want competition. Yes, so that may be a harder space to break into than people realize, but we'll see. I mean, I think it makes sense. China,
but you have the same issue again. China, I think, is 3 million units a year of sales. Something on that order.
Just to be clear, I think you and I have different numbers there. My numbers are North America is about 250 to 280,000 a year, and China's about 1 million a year.
About 1 million, even 1 million a year.
Yeah.
Let's say that it's only 1 million a year. We'll take your number, and they decided to go over and build a factory in China, and they were going to make 50,000 next year. It's still a drop in the bucket. And if somebody else makes 50,000 and somebody else makes 50,000, you're still not getting close to the demand. And the demand, I keep kind of reminding myself of the iPhone when it first came out, or actually when it second came out. When it first came out, there weren't lines around the block, but within time, there became lines around the block to get your iPhone. When fleet managers start looking at saving $60,000 a year, or 60 cents a mile is what it boils down to. It's 20 cents a mile for electric and 80 cents a mile for diesel. When you start looking at that comparison, they will be lined up around the block to get these, and having to wait.
Can you explain to the audience a little bit more about why semi is better? I mean, I think there's two things. One, I mean, we talked about that they drive a lot of miles a day or a lot of hours a day, but that's true with diesel semis as well. And they're more efficient. But what are some other advantages of semi over diesel semis, of Tesla semi over diesel semis?
Well, there's a social justice benefit.
I'm not interested in that one. Isn't there a performance side of it? Isn't there a performance side of it that it drives better and it doesn't break down as much? Can you go over that?
I wanted to go to the fun end first. That's all. I just wanted to talk about the fact that if you want to be giving, if you want to show that you're socially responsible.
No. You're never going to satisfy the social justice warrior. So just don't even try.
So anyway, yes.
I think your glasses reflect the patriarchy. That's the problem.
You know my politics, so I'm not particularly interested in whether it's socially relevant or not. But I know that there are people out there that do. Yeah. And so they're going to buy them just so they can put the sticker on the side.
We're old white men. Everything in the world is our fault.
It's true. So yes, so they are significantly safer. They virtually can't jackknife. They are, because of the way that the motors are set up and the way that the motors are controlled by the electronics, by the computers, it's almost impossible to jackknife them. It is regen braking. So when you're going downhill, the brakes are not being, you're not braking using brakes. You're not braking using gears like you do on a semi truck. You're braking using the regen of the end of the motors. And so you rarely ever have to touch the brakes.
You don't spend money as a truck owner. You don't spend money repairing the brakes or replacing the brakes or brake pads.
And you don't have runaways because you don't even have the risk of a runaway because the motors are doing all the work. It also allows you to go faster downhill than you would otherwise.
Yeah, let me just explain that runway thing. So for those who are living in Florida or flat states, when you're in the mountains and you're coming downhill, a semi can get out of control and run away, and they create these ramps that the semis can run onto when they lose control, that they give them a chance to slow down. And sometimes there's no such ramp there, and you can have a really bad accident because the trucker couldn't maintain the vehicle's velocity, and it ran out of control. Because Tesla semis use regenerative braking, because the motor itself slows the vehicle down or holds the vehicle from accelerating too much. That means that they're much safer, because that's one of the major safety hazards. The major safety hazards are jackknifing and runaways, and there's probably one or two more, but those are two of the big ones.
Right. So you have this advantage in terms of saving on your brakes, but you also then are not putting a bunch of brake linings into the atmosphere, which is these are really, really, when you talk about what you don't want to inhale, it would be brake linings.
Is that asbestos or something?
It's not asbestos, but it's not good for you. I can't remember what it is exactly. You'd have to have Brian Wong. He's my scientist. So if you want Brian Wong on your show, he can get into that stuff with you. But you also, when you're using regenerative braking, you also are obviously saving gasoline or saving energy. So you're putting energy back into the batteries. And then you're also able to go downhill faster. And because the motors are so efficient, you're able to go uphill faster. So anytime you're going uphill and downhill, you're saving time on the trip.
I got to tell a story now. I drove across the country and I drove into the mountains in like Nevada or California, and it was this long straight uphill. I was driving along and everybody's going 85 miles an hour. I'm going 85 miles an hour. Everybody's passing me. We start going up the hill, and I have a Plaid Model X, and really any Tesla just goes up a hill. There's a certain point where the air thins a little bit, and all the gas cars started lagging. And my car just kept going up that hill like there was no. It drives like there's no hill. It doesn't even know there's a hill.
Yeah,
it just goes up like nothing happened.
Right.
And all of a sudden, all the gas cars started lagging. And that's one of those things, is that these trucks, they can drive on Mars, right? They can drive in zero oxygen. They can drive on the moon.
Right.
And regular cars can't do that. And so when you get into high elevations, it matters as well. And there is to some level, some driving of semis at really high elevations where that's going to matter.
Right. Yeah. You also have a sound advantage. So we know that that city traffic is a huge creates a huge amount of sound pollution, if you will, in a city.
Noise pollution, sure.
It's a big thing, and with cars, obviously, we're going to be reducing that a lot. But trucks make a lot more noise than cars do, and so the noise reduction will also be there. Let's see. If we left anything out, well, of course,
you gave these numbers. You gave these numbers at the beginning about where Megapack was going to go, and we got to like 500 billion or 750 billion in revenue.
Right.
What do you see for semi?
So if you're talking, so I think there's a huge debate, and it's even going on in my mind as to what they're going to sell these for. I think they can legitimately sell the 500-mile range for $400,000 because the savings is there to do it.
I think that might be low.
It might even be low, but I think they could do it. Yeah. My question is, will Elon sell it for $400,000, even if he can, or will he sell it for less because of his theory that you want to make it available? And it's fine, but usually if I was doing it, I'd want to get the maximum dollar I could get from the customer. What does the market tell us it should be at? If it's a market, I'm saying it's $400,000.
And let's just be clear here. The reason that's worth $400,000 when a typical diesel semi might sell for $200,000, I'm making up the number.
Right.
But if the typical diesel semi sells for $200,000, the point is, if you're saving the owner $60,000 a year for 10 years, you're saving the owner $600,000 and you cost them $200,000 more. So net they're saving $400,000. That's
And that was
why
and
that's
that
why
was
they would
just,
pay $400,000 for the truck.
and that was just on the diesel. That wasn't counting the savings on the brakes. That wasn't saving the downtime for maintenance. That, you know, there's a huge number of other things where there's savings as well, which we hadn't mentioned in the other list. It was the maintenance. You know, I had
there are routes that trucks go where having Tesla's performance advantage means you will get there quicker.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You will be able to deliver your payload to your cargo to people quicker, and then turn the vehicle around and go do the next job quicker. And so there's actually added value in that as well.
Yeah, and one of the negatives out there, just to dispel one of the myths, is that, well, Tesla can't probably carry a full load. You know, they won't be able to go the 500 miles. There's all this myth making out there. The reality is somewhere between 60 and 80% of the trucks on the road that are on the road never take a full load. So I've been a wholesaler, importer, exporter, manufacturer. I know what it takes to fill up a truck in terms of weight. Most of the time, you're not going to fill it up in weight. You're going to fill it up in space.
Yeah.
So you have to have lead. You have to have Pepsis. You have to have something that weighs a lot per volume in order to fill up a truck by weight. So 60 to 80% of trucks never take a full load.
So what we're seeing though is if they sell, I'm going to go away from your million semis, and I'm going to say, let's say 500,000 semis. And by the way, I don't think they're 1,000 kilowatt hours. I think they're 800 kilowatt hours. Or
it might be 900, 800. We don't know yet.
Right. If they sell 500,000 of them at $400,000 a pop, that adds up to a big number, but I don't know it off the top of my head. What's the number?
200 billion.
200 billion. So Megapack's bigger, but semi is just one part of the vehicle story.
Yes.
And that's still pretty big. And then is there a robo-taxi angle to semi that people should know about?
4. So if I'm buying a semi truck, if I'm buying more than one, at least if I'm buying 5 or 10, I'm going to want a mega charger. And I might want a mega charger if I'm point to point, I might want a mega charger.
One at each point. Yeah.
A point to point means a truck that only goes back and forth between 2 locations all the time. So if I'm not point to point, I might just want one at my resting spot, the home for the truck.
The truck stops,
if I have a mega charger, I'm going to need a Megapack, because the mega charger takes energy or uses energy at such a fast rate that you can't use it off of your regular energy supply at your factory or at your distribution center, whatever it is. So you need to bring in a Megapack in order to manage that load. And so
I think limiting factor actually made that point. The YouTube channel Limiting Factor, Jordan Giese, I think he made that point in a recent video.
Right. So you probably need one of these Megapacks rather, for every 5 to 10. Probably if you get to 5, you're going to need one. You can probably do 10 with one Megapack. So there's something on that order. So now you're going to spend $2.2 million to buy a Megapack. Now, if I'm doing all of that and I've got a factory or a distribution center or a Walmart or a Kmart, well, no more Kmarts, okay, or a Costco, I've got a lot of roof and I've got a lot of parking. So I'm going to put solar over all of it, because now I can get my energy for free. So now Tesla technically has the opportunity to sell them solar. Now, in addition to all of that, they're not going to just sell them the solar and the Megapack and the Mega Charger. They're going to sell them the software in order to do arbitrage with the grid and potentially reduce their costs even more. And then on top of all of that, I don't remember how many fingers I'm up to right now. We're talking about, and I know you spent a lot of time talking about this on your channel, you're either going to put these trucks eventually into some kind of a not platooning. You're only going to have the lead truck with a driver, and the rest are going to follow behind without a driver.
I heard somebody at Tesla say that platooning sounds good. Platooning, for people who don't know, is when one vehicle is driven by a human. In this story, when there's vehicles traveling in a convoy, when there's like 3 or 4 of them driving together. And what I heard was that it's a very small share of the truck market that would benefit from platooning. Now, I think another piece of the story that, even with your optimism, I think you're missing, and you and I may have talked about this before, is semi is so efficient that it might steal business from not just diesel semis, but from rail.
But
And
I think I think you have to get to full self-driving to do that.
no, even without
really?
without full self-driving, it would take some business from rail. There's a long-standing competition going back and forth for decades between tractor trailers and rail. And for a while, the rail is doing well, and then all of a sudden somebody comes up with an innovation in trucking, and the trucking starts taking a little bit of share from the rail, and then the rail innovates and they take some share back. And semi is such a game changer for cost per kilogram mile that it probably ends up stealing some more business from the trains.
Right.
And so the market is actually bigger than the market for diesel semis because it also includes some of the market for trains.
And at the point where they do start platooning or do full self-driving, it's really potentially going to steal from rail. Yeah.
All right. So we are at my limit for how much time I have.
Okay.
I'm looking at my clock like, okay, I got to get ready to go. So is there anything else you wanted to say before? I mean, do you want to tell the audience more about your latest book? Do you have a copy you can show us?
Sure. Yeah. Where is that? Oh, it's way over there. Well, let me grab this one. Yeah. Copy of the book is right here. This one is the author's copies. It doesn't normally have a black stripe across it like that.
Right.
but the only thing I would say about the Elon Musk mission at this point is we broke the story on Lathrop and on Megapack. There's bunches of other stories in there that we've also broken, but they're just as big. They just aren't out there yet. Yeah. Elon's always saying things. And if you'll pay really close attention and you do some analysis, you can draw some conclusions that aren't necessarily out there for everybody to see. So I just encourage people, if you want to see what's coming that hasn't yet been exposed in the Twitter sphere, then read the book.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to put a link to Randy's book in the description below and ask everybody to check it out. Randy, don't hang up on me when I shut the Zoom off. But just before we finish, I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to ask you just before we finish, please check out my other videos. Please support me on the Locals platform on Patreon or as a YouTube channel member. Please check out the t-shirts at elonbits.com. Please like this video, share, and subscribe. Check out Randy's channel. I'll put a link to that in the description below. Check him out on Twitter. And thanks everybody so much for watching.